Hey there, YouTube folks. Welcome to another video and check out what we have up here. Today we're going to learn chess openings. That's right, a topic you guys ask me for a lot here on the channel. And I owed you this, but now we're going to start our journey here, learning the openings, okay? Let's start with the London system, and we already have some openings on the channel too, okay? I'll put it in the card here as the video goes on, closer to the end, so that you, if you're interested, can also take a look at those other openings we already have here on the channel. Today, we're going to learn the Londo system, and we'll see how to tune our Londo system by getting to know 4 of the main variations of this system, so that we can overcome our opponents by playing this extraordinary opening. And let's get straight to today's lesson. So guys, here we are, and today we're going to learn, yes, the London system, that's right. Well guys, before we actually get into the London system itself, I want to show you here the difference between an opening system and a conventional opening, okay? Well, basically a conventional opening. The moves we're going to make are closely related to the moves our opponent is making, so our moves aren't always the same. The variations change based on what our opponent does, right? And in an opening system, basically, it doesn't have that, okay? So basically, the opening system, you always play the same formation. The pieces always go to the same places, right? We'll see that in the London system today. However, since we're here learning the London system, I'm not going to show it to you that way, okay? Why? Yes, we're going to learn this here in a proper way. Understanding our opponent's moves and eventually stepping out of the traditional formation to surprise our opponent with the London system. That's right. I don't even know if this will be an opening system anymore, but the moves I'm going to show you here are really strong moves, okay? These are moves for people who really study the London system. So let's first learn here what the basic formation of the London system is. For that, I'm going to play a few moves with black to show you the position that white usually reaches with their pieces, okay? The London system starts with 1 d4. I'll make some moves for black now, okay? So the bishop goes to the f4 square e3. This is the move that forms the London system. Knight goes to f3, e3, e3, bishop d3, knight from b to d2, and now castling. And basically, this is the main setup for those who play the London system. The London bishop is here on f4. Both knights are developed. The bishop as well, and the king is protected. There's a key strategy in this setup that anyone playing the London system must watch closely and handle carefully. It's the strategic theme for white. The control of the e5 square. So, you always have to watch over the e5 square because it's the square that will end up limiting black. It's the square that bothers our opponent's position, okay? And the London system? Can it lead to many attacking positions? Yes, the London system can often have a very aggressive opening. Because notice that our bishops are pointing here towards black's kingside castling, which is what usually happens. Our bishops are aiming at black's castling, and the knights are jumping to advanced positions here very quickly. In fact, the queen also moves to h5 in many positions. We might also consider playing f4 and sometimes bringing the rook to the 3rd rank to attack the opponent's king. So basically, these are some ideas that can happen, okay? So let's look at the main ones. The 4 main continuations and variations to play against black using our London system. So the London system consists of the move d4 as an auto, and the most played move by black in this position is d5. And now we're going to play here with bishop f4 playing the London system. Knight f6 is the most played move by black. And then the move e3. We've reached that point where there are a few different continuations for black. The main continuations here are to play e6, which we'll cover in this variation, and bishop f5, which we will also look at, and c5. These are the 3 main variations for black. In this London system setup, Raphael, did you say we'd learn 4 London system variations? Well, the 4th variation is different. It's here in the first move. When we play d4, black responds with knight to f6. We're going to look at this variation too later on in today's video. Let's move on to the main variations. From our London system, knight f6, e3. And the first variation we're going to learn, as I told you, is the variation with e6. There's the variation with bishop f5 and with c5, which we will see next. Let's see then the variation with e6, how white plays against this variation. The strategic idea for black with the move e6 is to quickly develop the bishop through d6, aiming to exchange our bishop here, London. Right, that's what black wants, so we'll play that. We'll develop our knight to f3, its usual square. Then bishop to d6, offering a bishop exchange. White has several ways to play this position, okay? Including keeping the bishop here without any fear of black capturing this bishop. For example, white can play bishop to d3 here, and there's no problem if black captures the bishop on f4. We'll recapture with the pawn and have very strong control. On the e5 square, as I said, it's the strategic square for those who play the London system, okay? But that's not the variation I'm going to recommend to you, okay? I'm going to recommend that in this position, you play bishop to g3, because I think it's a more interesting opening sequence for white. The idea for white here is that if black takes the bishop on g3, white will recapture with the h-pawn. And now the h-file is open, and we'll be able to have attacking themes along this file. Because in this case, white can castle queenside and come up with an attack here against our opponent's position. So in many cases, in the vast majority of cases, since life isn't easy, our opponent won't take here. And the natural moves for black in this position are kingside castling, so protecting the castled position, right? The king? We'll continue our usual development here. Bishop to d3, black can respond with c5, aiming to create tension at d4. But we already know that the London setup is to play with c3. Building this pawn structure here, right, as we saw in the first moves, showing the standard position, black can continue by playing knight to c6. Here, we'll move the knight from b to d2. After queen to e7, which is a strong move. I often play it myself as black. Black has a very direct idea of playing the freeing move, the move e5, but as I said, the e5 square is very important. It's a strategic square for white, and we can't allow that, okay? You can't allow your opponent to play e5. Black can't have the freedom to play e5 to free the bishop and open the game. So what should we do next? Should we place our e5 Super Pegasus here? Blocking black's advance, which is quite annoying for black, because black tries to remove the knight on e5 but can't. That's unlikely to happen since if you take with the knight from e6d takes e5. And now white already wins a piece here and consequently will win the game, right? A little pawn fork. And another option which also isn't very pleasant for black is to give up the pair of bishops. Playing here with the bishop takes on e5 in this case. We're going to capture with the pawn. And after knight to d7 f4, which is a very strong move for white, okay? Notice the bishop's dominance on this diagonal. The knight moves to f3 and the queen may go to h5. Then the king will be protected immediately by castling. And this is a very strong position, already with an advantage for white. Okay? So it's very difficult here for our opponent to get rid of our Super Pegasus. So a much more common move in this position. After knight to e5, you simply play bishop to d7 and try to survive here. After our move of 4, notice that the e5 square has been completely dominated here by white, and it's a very good position for white. Okay, the short castle is coming. Knight to f3, preparing a kingside attack. If you reach this position, you've already reached a very acceptable position. You got through the opening phase very well. So basically, the line with e6 is a really tough line for those playing as black, because we're going to enter this variation that we just saw, a very interesting variation. However, black has other options. We saw the e6 variation along with other lines we'll examine today. It can also end up transposing into this variation. Let's look at variation number 2 here. When black plays with c5, it's an interesting move, a move that makes a lot of sense. Why? Because since the bishop has moved out, the bishop from c1 quickly came out here to f4. Now black subtly targets the pawn on b2 by moving the queen to b6. And there is a very strong continuation, of course, for white, also against this variation. Against this variation, we're going to play here with knight to f3. Natural moves of the London. Waiting for our opponent to play queen to b6. So now, yes, we can make a different move. And it makes our system change a bit. London, We're not going to play the traditional London moves here. The knight won't go out through d2 anymore. Now we'll play with it on c3, so we've changed. And I think now it's no longer a system opening, it's a regular opening, because we're changing the formation of our pieces according to what our opponent is doing. Raphael, but here you're giving up the b2 pawn. Be careful. Guys, this is a trick in the London system. Because if our opponent takes on b2, this pawn is very poisoned. White is going to win this position here. Knight to b5 is a very strong move. We're threatening to come in here on c7, which would... Oops. We're threatening to come in on c7, which would be a fork here, winning the rook for free on the 8th rank. Black can only defend against this by playing knight to a6 to protect that square. And now there's a powerful finishing move here, winning material by playing rook to b1. Notice that the queen has no escape squares. Everything is defended. The only way out for the queen is to capture the pawn on a2. But here we play again with rook to a1. The rook goes back and forth, and the queen is once again out of squares. She has to move to b2. And now the big move. Rook takes a6 and captures the knight. After the b pawn is taken, knight moves to c7. And here we are going to win the black rook with a big advantage for white. So a move here. If our opponent goes for this line, which would be very interesting with queen to b6, but if our opponent doesn't go for this line, we also have other options. We have our plan B here. If our opponent in this position plays knight to c6 instead of queen to b6, it won't make much sense because they can't take on b2. After knight to c6, we'll play c3 here. And we return to the traditional system setup. London, that's right. And this position here is interesting. The line we just studied earlier ends up transposing into this variation, which helps us in studying the opening, because they are two lines, two variations that end up going into the same line, which is always very good. So here, black plays e6, and after bishop to d3, bishop to d6. Notice again the idea of exchanging the bishops. We retreat the bishop to g3 with the same idea. If black captures on g3, we take with the h-pawn and open the h-file. And after black castles short, knight to bd2. Captures on e7, aiming to break through with knight to e5. It's the same position we saw earlier, so this can happen quite often. And that's good because we end up going into a position that's already been studied, and that's great for us. So we've also seen the line with c5 here, which is an interesting line for black, also the line with c5. And now let's look at the third line here, bishop f5. This line here is also very interesting. The idea for black now is different. Black wants to keep the bishop. The bishop on c8 is outside the pawn chain. They want to play e6, and the bishop stays outside the pawn chain, participating more in the game. In this case, how are we going to play here? Well, in this case, we're going to play by moving our pieces. Let's play our knight here. f3, the natural move in this position, and then the move e6. Again, we'll avoid the opening systems. Playing c4 is a very interesting move. Why? Because the idea is that since black got rid of the bishop on c8 quickly, placing the bishop outside the pawn structure, the pawn on b7 gets more exposed. We play c4 to bring our queen to b3 and create problems. For black's position, so black in this position, the most played move here is c6, which brings the idea of moving the queen to defend the little pawn here. Queen b3 attacking the pawn on b7 here. One of the most common ways for black to defend the pawn on b7 is to play queen b6. Next, we'll develop a new strategic idea. Here in this position, which is very interesting for white, is to play c5 queen, attacking the queen. The most common move in this position is exchanging queens. So another forced line, which is always good, a takes on b2. And it seems like here, Raphael, but here the structure is getting broken. No problem, guys. There's a very good strategic idea here in this position. After knight to bd7, we play here with knight to c3. And the idea for white is to push the b pawn here to undermine the c6 square. And at some point, we can move the bishop to attack this pawn here, or even reposition the knight this way to attack the c6 pawn. These are long-term strategic ideas, but our opponent will be very cramped in this position. Notice something. The bishop on f8 is completely blocked here by the white pawn structure, and the knight isn't able to participate in the game properly, so the knight is also quite restricted. Always remember, it's fundamental for anyone playing the London system as white to control the e5 square, which is what's happening here. We can't neglect the e5 square at any moment. This position here is very good for white. Okay, guys, white has the advantage here in this position. It's a difficult position for black to continue, but it's really amazing for us to learn this concept of also stepping out of the opening system. This is very important. We also reviewed the line with the bishop on f5 and evaluated strategic ideas. And now let's look at the line when our opponent tries to get out in a sneaky way. What if he moves the knight to f6 instead of playing d5? Well, in this case, again, we're not going to play an opening system. We're going to play a very different idea here. We'll play our bishop to full 4 here, right? Let's see what our opponent does next. This will lead to lines we've already studied. But if our opponent plays g6 here, then we're going to completely change our ideas here, and we're going to play knight to c3. And after bishop to g7, which is black's idea, we're going to play e4 here, creating this super pawn center, right? Black's plan is to castle, and playing d6 also aims to limit these ideas. So d6 here, this is starting to look like a King's Indian. And white here, in this position, can play with an attacking idea. So it's a very interesting line as well, playing here with d2. After castling, a strong focus here for white. And white will play in this position with f3, g4, h4. And an avalanche of pawns against our opponent, completely surprising him with a very aggressive attack here on the king's side. So these are my suggestions for you to play with the London system. Also according to what our opponent is doing. So there's a lot of information here. There are many strategic ideas. The main variations are highlighted here in our video lesson today from our Learning Openings series. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment if you like this Learning Openings series so I can bring more openings from our chess. So, guys, if you like this video of learning openings, I'll leave 2 more suggestions for openings that are already in our playlist. They're up here. So, the Grob, one of the openings with the most traps in chess, and also the basic concepts of openings that every beginner should know. So, go ahead and click there and check out those videos too. If you like this video here, don't forget to leave a big like down below. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe to this little channel here. Because we're aiming for 100K, right? Guys, so don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment below what you think about our new playlist, Learning the Openings. I hope you guys enjoyed it and see you in the next videos. Thanks, everyone.